9:05 on a Tuesday morning, and it's a very good morning to Karen Andrews, Federal Member for McPherson. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning. It's great to be back at 4CRB again.
Yes, a little surprise. Normally you're not a Tuesday girl, but it's nice to have you in.
No, it's great to be here.
We've had a very torrid couple of weeks with Cyclone Alfred. How did you go?
Absolutely. Look, it's been horrendous for people on the Gold Coast, northern New South Wales and Brisbane, a little bit further north from that. So here on the Gold Coast, I think we all played the waiting game, wondering what Alfred was going to do. So effectively, I think we had 3 days of pretty ordinary weather here with some pretty high winds. People have had some pretty serious damage done to their properties.
Yes.
Quite a number have sent photos through to me, and in some of those photos you see all these gum trees in particular that have fallen over, and underneath all of that is a house, and you sort of go, these people were actually so lucky that yes, they've got some major damage to their house, but they're still alive and they're dealing with the outcome of what's happened. So it's been horrendous. I was lucky, really minor damage to my property, which will take probably a while to get fixed along with everyone else's, but we're a low priority, so I expect it's going to take a while.
Much damage to your place?
Look, it was really sort of the cosmetic stuff. I found a couple of leaks that I didn't have in the roof before, so
I think
we'll deal with
did.
Yes, we'll deal with that. But some poor people have only just got power on, and some
That's
are still
right.
waiting for power, and that's a very long time.
What part of the cleanup will take the longest to address, Karen?
Look, I think it's basically getting things cleaned up. So the cleanup was always going to be the hardest part of it. So we had a lot of opportunity to prepare, and people did. Then they waited, and then the cleanup started. And you look around the streets now, and I think council's done a terrific job with getting out there quickly, but there's still a lot of trees that are down, trees that have been chopped and are waiting to be picked up as well. So that's going to take a long time. And for people who've not had power for 10 days, getting their lives back on track is going to take a lot of time. And I think it's very easy after you have a natural disaster. People do move on quite quickly, but for quite a large number of people on the Gold Coast, it will take months. It's
still having an effect. As you said, a couple of our volunteers only got power back on yesterday, and you think about that, no hot showers, no food in the fridge. During the height of it all, if you couldn't cook or your food was rotten, you were looking for something to eat somewhere along the way, and the pantry was bare at Coles and Woolies.
Yes, absolutely. And we did once again see a bit of panic buying, and I could not believe it when there was a rush on toilet paper again. Honestly, I think almost every day in COVID I was saying to people, you don't need to buy toilet paper. We have big supplies of that in Australia. And then when I'm hearing that supermarkets are starting to run low on toilet paper, I thought, oh my goodness, you don't need to buy large quantities of
It's
toilet
amazing
paper.
that's the priority, isn't it, really? Food, I would have thought it would be right up there.
I know, but look, there's something. There is something about toilet paper that people don't want to run out.
That's right, and look, we won't go there. All right, what have people been saying that is their top priority for recovery?
Well, for those people that were without power, that was the most significant thing for them. And look, and there was an interesting comment from some people I was speaking with out in Currumbin Valley. And yes, our beaches have been devastated without a doubt. And yes, there needs to be work done to restore our beaches as well. But the comments from people out in Currumbin Valley is, well, I'd actually just like to be able to flush my toilet.
Yes, that's right.
So I think priority is let's get that power back on. Let's help those people get back on their feet. And then let's start to have a bit of a look around. So people were really focused on how to get their lives back to what they were before, and they still are, and they will be for many weeks.
Yeah, many weeks. And northern New South Wales also was horrendously impacted, but they seem to be getting the power, but was back on very, very quickly.
Yes. So, look, I was worried about northern New South Wales because we've seen what can happen, particularly around the Lismore and surrounding areas there when they've got massive floods. So there was a big concern that with the tail of the cyclone, we were going to be most affected, and I really was just holding my breath, hoping that northern New South Wales was going to be okay. Now, yes, they still had some flooding, and yes, there's been some devastation through some of those areas, but it could have been a lot worse.
A lot worse, agreed. It looked, the little dance around in Moreton Bay really took a lot of the sting out of its tail, but imagine what it would have been like as a Category 2. It would have been horrendous.
Absolutely.
Can we improve disaster response for next time?
Look, I think there's always some things that we can learn out of disaster recovery, and given that we touched on COVID just before, I was very much in favour of reviewing what happened during COVID to see what we could do better in the event that there was a similar sort of a health crisis that happened. I think that it's timely now to have a look at what the recovery process is going to be following Tropical Cyclone Alfred, but also look at the preparedness. I think overall you'd say it was pretty good.
Yeah, sure.
Some of the messaging that got out was pretty good. The biggest issue I think that people faced when the cyclone started to come through was the loss of communication.
Correct.
So for those people that lost their power and they ran out of battery on their phones, they couldn't find out what was going on. For many other people, the reception was patchy. It was in and out. And I think that there are some real issues with communication. And it almost was back to basics as to how you find out what is happening. So communication is definitely something that I think we need to look at and see how we can improve that.
I know we had our radios on at home, and that was the saving grace for if power went out. But I did hear that, and we experienced across the Gold Coast, whether you had power or not, the mobile network suffered considerably, and it was very, very difficult to. It's all wonderful when we're sending text messages saying prepare to evacuate when the mobile network isn't transferring that on.
Absolutely. And then there were people who didn't know how their families were because they couldn't get any reception, and there's no communication at all that's happening, and they don't know if their ageing parents were okay, if their siblings were okay, and that was a concern because they then took risks to get out there and check on people. And it's great to be able to go and check on people, but if we'd had better communication, and I don't know that there's a simple answer to that. I mean, it was a natural disaster that came through, and it took out the communications and it took out the power. But let's look at what we might be able to do next time. Absolutely. Look, it's always good to look in the rearview mirror and work out what is a better way of dealing with things and what we can do better next time. Not that we hope that one turns up in the next few years. I think it's 50 years between drinks, but anyway. Yeah, absolutely. Look, we were really fortunate. I actually grew up in Townsville, so cyclones were something that people were often having to prepare for. Sure. We were fortunate here. Yes, we were. On the Gold Coast, and hopefully it'll be more than 50 years until we see another one. Absolutely, God willing. Yeah. All right, change of pace. The budget will be happening at the end of the month. What are the key items your constituents are hoping to hear about? Well, yes, so we go back to Canberra next week, and the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, will be handing down the budget. I think that what most Australians will be looking for is cost of living relief. So it will be interesting to see how the government chooses to deal with that. For most people, the money that they had off their electricity bills is all but gone now, but electricity prices still keep going up, as does everything else at the moment. So people are hurting and will continue to hurt. Great that we've had a drop in interest rates come through, but it really is just a small step forward. So I think people will be looking at what cost of living support is going to be in the budget. And I think people will also be looking for what is the plan for the future. Now, we're obviously heading into a federal election, so it will be called any day after the budget is handed down. And I think people are really looking at what's the direction, what's the vision for this country, what are the leaders going to say about where Australia is headed. It's been somewhat combative over the last few months in particular, and I think people are saying, I need to know what the future is going to look like, and if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, show it to me. Yes, absolutely, because it does seem like we're stuck in the mud and talking about things that really
don't matter as much to the common power. $3,000 extra per year in our shopping bills, and these are the type of figures that we're starting to go, hang on a minute. And then you start to hear, well, last summer the Bureau of Meteorology forecast a drought, so the farmers sold off a lot of their cattle, but we didn't see a drop in price in beef at the register. So there's some disconnects along the way, and hopefully we can get those sorted out or looked at as part of a priority. It's a difficult mechanism, all of these things in the background, and that's what we hope that our leaders are looking after for us.
Absolutely. And people are very focused on how they're putting food on the table.
Yes.
And I think they're looking from the leaders of this country to say, well, this is how we're going to deal with these things. And let's get back to basics. In this country. Let's focus on what are the really important things, and some things just cannot be addressed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, changing again. Trump has imposed tariffs on Australian goods and services limited to aluminium and steel at this point in time. Do you think the federal government should prioritise the economic impact of tariffs or diplomatic relationships with trading partners?
Well, I think it's fair to say that President Trump has got a lot going on
yes.
at the moment. Every day we seem to wake up to news of a particular action that he has taken, whether it's Middle East, whether it's with Russia and Ukraine. But importantly for Australia, the tariffs will have an impact on our producers here. So we do obviously produce steel and aluminium in this country. With tariffs going on, it will mean that our producers will have to look at other markets. It is important that we retain that capability here in Australia. So I don't know that it's going to be so much government support to prop up those industries, but there will certainly be assistance there through the likes of Austrade, which helps all of our producers here and others look at developing markets, other markets that they can go into. So I think it's now the responsibility of the likes of Austrade as well as the producers themselves to go, well, where are our markets going to be? So if we're not going to be able to be competitive in the United States, because that's what it's doing, it's just adding on an extra 25% to what the costs are. So if we're not going to be competitive in the United States, so product can still go in there, it's just that it will be
more expensive.
Expensive. And President Trump's obviously doing that to support his own industries, and you can understand that. We would want to be supporting our industries as well. The issue will be what the flow-on effects might be. So there's a lot of speculation as to whether or not it will be just steel and aluminium or it will be medicines, for example. Now, I was a little bit concerned to see that the government was focusing on critical minerals and doing a deal. Critical minerals are incredibly important to the world.
Yes.
And my concern is that critical minerals have now become the new iron ore, and that we've long been criticised both globally and within our own country for the fact that what Australia does, and we do it well, is dig up minerals from the earth, and then we ship it off overseas without adding any value to it, and then we buy it back when it's been processed at a significantly higher price. I don't want to see the same things happening with critical minerals. So let's just not start the process of digging up our critical minerals and shipping them off overseas to be processed, because we will be making the same mistakes as what we did with iron ore. So that concerns me. Now, we do manufacture a lot of medicines here in Australia. We need to be making sure that we've got our supply chains here for what the raw materials are going to be. And I think one of the things that we did learn from COVID is that our supply chains are important. And for us to be totally reliant on other countries is a disaster waiting to happen.
Absolutely.
So this is a wake-up call for Australia to look at what we can manufacture here, what we can produce here in this country, and what other markets we need to develop.
Absolutely. Look, just looking at a primary industry and not looking at the secondary and tertiary component, especially when we control the source, just seems like an economic suicide to me. We should be making sure that we're sending it out at a second or a tertiary level.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that the coalition government did, and it was during the time that I was the industry minister, and Keith Pitt was the resources minister, we actually looked at critical minerals and putting support in there to develop the technology and the processing that we needed to do to ensure that we weren't just digging up the critical minerals and shipping them off overseas. And yes, making a lot of money and propping up the budgets through that as well too, but the short-term gains were not what Australia needed. So we actually looked at what we could do with minerals processing. Some of the things that we do in the mining sector, particularly with technology, is in fact world leading.
Wow.
And the more that we can do along those lines, the better off this nation will be.
Agreed. All right. Do you agree with the Prime Minister's stance on standing firm regarding tariffs?
Look, I think we need to be firm but be sensible with what we're doing with tariffs. Now, we have a new world leader, and he is the world leader effectively with President Donald Trump. We do need to work with him. United States is an ally, but we do have other allies as well. I think what's important, and probably what the President himself will respect, is Australia taking a strong stand to protect its own interests. So it will be a negotiation, it will be a deal that needs to be made as well, but let's not sell everything off in Australia just to try and get a deal.
That's exactly right. All right. One of my favourite topics, do you think consumers are fixated on the rising cost of power in the context of overall rising cost of living, that they have become complacent about the alternatives to coal-fired energy and just want the government to do something to reduce the cost?
Yeah. Look, there's a few things in that question. When people speak to me and they talk about cost of living, energy isn't the first thing that they raise. Now, in fairness, there have been a number of government subsidies that have reduced the cost of electricity. With cost of living, people speak to me predominantly about food and groceries because I can't understand how that has gone up so dramatically. And I think that's a fair point that's being raised. There does need to be some alternatives to coal, and I can remember making some comments probably 10 or so years ago that basically what we needed to do was extend the life of our coal-fired power stations until such time as that we had alternatives in place.
Sure. Now,
renewables were interesting, and I did note the advice that was given for people to turn off their solar systems when Tropical Cyclone Alfred was approaching. And they did that because of the vulnerability of the panels themselves. But also if there was a power surge and you took out your inverter, that actually is generally not covered by any insurance. I've been advised. I didn't blow up my inverter, so I've not checked that one myself, but that's what I was told. So I think we've got to start looking at a couple of things. One is how else are we going to replace coal-fired power stations, because they are getting old. In Queensland alone, the coal-fired power stations are pretty much all past their design life. So they are really just hanging on at the moment. So what are they going to be replaced with? Now, I know that there's been a lot of talk about nuclear and setting up nuclear power plants here in Australia. Look, I'm supportive of the concept of nuclear power, but it's not going to bring down your power bill next week or next month.
No.
It's going to be probably 10 years to be able to do that. Now, that's not a reason to put it off, okay?
No.
But people are looking at what the alternatives are going to be. We do have a very high take-up of solar power here. The issue then becomes the battery storage.
Yes.
So some people do have batteries, and there's an increasing number of people that do have battery storage for their solar systems. But they're still very, very expensive at this point, and to be honest, I don't know that there's many people that have got sufficient battery storage that they can run exclusively on solar power. One of the things that we did do in government for the coalition was actually look at standing up some research work on battery capability and developing battery storage here in Australia. So it's actually based in Western Australia, but I hope that continues to go. So I think to answer your question, people aren't fixated too much on how the power is produced. They just want to know that when they flick the switch, it's going to come through.
Correct.
And it's then the role of government to say what is the best mix that's going to be, and it has to be a mix. It can't be just one.
No, it can't. It's just like anything else. You adjust all of the throttles, I suppose. And yes, solar does have a part to play. But if we look at what it's producing, I think Ben Fordham yesterday quoted a number. It produced 7% of New South Wales power yesterday. So there's still a long way to go if we're going to look at solar being the primary source.
Yep, absolutely. And the solutions lie with gas.
Yes.
And being able to get some gas into the system to fuel our power plants, and then for direct usage for the gases as well. And I must say I was very grateful I've actually got some gas at home as well too, so I wasn't totally reliant on whether or not the power ran. But, that's, gas supply on the Gold Coast is no means. It's basically all bottled.
It is, very much so.
If you want it as well. So there are alternatives out there, but we seriously need to be thinking outside the box.
Absolutely. All right, we're coming towards the end of the show, Karen, and my understanding, forgive me, you're the guru here, once the election's called and I think Parliament is dissolved, that is the end of your role as federal member for McPherson, is that right?
It is. It is.
And you're retiring.
Well, I'm definitely going to take a few months break. So what will happen is the Prime Minister will announce the election, and then normally a day or two after that, there's a formal process where the writs are issued to dissolve the Parliament. So at that point, given that I'm not contesting, I finish. So I'm not here through the election period. So it's quite different to what happens in other jurisdictions, for example, local government. So I will finish at that point. My office as such will not be the Karen Andrews office. It will become the McPherson Electorate office. So that office will continue to provide some support to people, but I won't be there.
Yes.
So what I am planning to do is I'll be taking a couple of months of sabbatical. So until the end of the current financial year, I will be doing only little bits of work. The majority of my time will be having a rest,
yes, and
getting myself back on track. 15 years in the one role is a long time, and in politics, like is the case now in so many other jobs, it's not 9 to 5.
No,
and being able to have a weekend will be nice. I'm hoping my family's pleased to see me. We'll test that out very shortly.
Look, you were saying off air that you very rarely got a chance to take any sort of time for yourself over that 15 years. It was a week here or a week there, and that was pretty much it. Yeah,
absolutely. So at the risk of sounding like I'm complaining, which I'm not, what a lot of people don't realise is that federal parliamentarians don't accrue any annual leave or any long service leave. So I will be paid up until the day I finish, which is fine. Our community expects us to be available as much as we possibly can. So that's meant that I and just about all of my colleagues have minimised the leave that we have taken. So I think that I've probably got to the point now where I need to take a couple of months off to reset, and then I'll put my head up and see what's next for me.
I was about to ask, what is next for you?
Well, look, I've been approached about a couple of board roles, so I'll see where that heads, but I think it's a case of watch this space.
There you go. All right, so let's talk about your 15 years, Karen. Highs and lows. What was some of those memorable high points?
Well, the absolute best from a local point of view was being able to help people. So often by the time people get to my office, they've tried to help themselves in multiple ways and have just hit dead ends. So being able to help people's been a real highlight. And there was one girl in particular that I, along with others, managed to secure a life-saving drug for her, and a huge thanks to Gold Coast University Hospital because of the role that they played in that. So for me to be able to say that I know that I saved one life means a lot to me.
Yes.
So that's very important. Look, the highlights. I never stood for election to be a minister. I never ever focused on that. My priority was always to support the people here, and I was very fortunate to become the industry minister.
Yes.
And to be responsible for developing a manufacturing policy, $1.5 billion.
Wow.
Which I think Australia very much needed. To be the industry minister when we had to deal with COVID is something I hope I never have to go through again, but it was a real opportunity to see Australian manufacturing at its best as we kicked in and started converting basically the sleep apnea machines so that we could use those as ventilators, but setting up other ventilators, manufacturing masks here in this country, increasing our surgical mask manufacturing capacity from 2 million a year pre-COVID to over 400 million in the first year. You know, to be able to be part of that was pretty impressive. When I was moved to the Home Affairs portfolio, look, that was an opportunity for me to really take a deep dive into national security in this country. And I think it brought out in me a very, very strong desire to make sure that each and every Australian was as safe as I could possibly make them. So working with the Australian Federal Police, with ASIO, they were some real highlights. Having a personal protection team, I never really contemplated that I would have a personal protection team. And I guess when I first got the team, and to be honest, I was sworn in and they were waiting outside my door. So it was seamless.
I must admit that was the fun part of you at the time. We used to have a swarm of them surrounding the building and cars out the front motoring ready to race you off. It was quite exhilarating.
Yeah, look, you know, it was an entirely new world for me and for my family, whilst we had the 24/7 protection in place. I had just the best team, I've got to say. They were super professional. I learnt so much about what they did in their roles as well too. But it was a different world then. And I guess over the years, if I look back on it, I mean, about $2 billion in funding came into this electorate. And I laugh every now and then when I read that, there's only a little bit of money that's come into the electorate. What a load of rubbish. You know, quite frankly, $2 billion when you start to add it up. Now,
look, if you could just run through that list, Karen. I was at a not-for-profit event and I can't remember where it came from, but there was a list of things that you had achieved and the dollar values attached to them. And I know that dollar values aren't the be-all and end-all as a measuring stick, but it is a great way to say, hey, this is what my 15 years was all about.
Yeah, so community grants, which is, you know, to your local not-for-profits, you know, people who are out there all day trying to do things for our community, about $18 million came in and was dispersed to them over my time as a parliamentarian. Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary received about $13 million. Which is a significant amount of money. And I used to say to them every time I went to the wildlife hospital, you know, when these koalas turn up and the other native wildlife, I mean, they don't turn up with a Medicare card. You know, so someone's actually got to be paying for them as well. So I was happy to be able to support them with about $13 million. I guess the biggest ticket items were really the transport infrastructure and particularly the upgrades to the M1, given that it was a 2007 election commitment, but the money ran out at Mudgeeraba, so I had to go back and get money for Mudgeeraba to Varsity and then for the upgrade that's currently underway. And I think I am one of the very few people that seriously like seeing the traffic banked up to see the roadworks rather than traffic banked up on the M1, because whilst it won't be finished before I conclude my time as the member for McPherson, it will happen in the not too distant future. So that will be great.
Yes.
But money has gone into surf life saving here to support them with defibrillators.
Yes.
Along the way. So there's been lots of money in lots of different areas that have come through. But yeah, the total is about $2 billion.
That's amazing.
It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. And of course that doesn't include the money that goes for people for various welfare payments and those sorts of things. That's quite separate. This is very specific funding that has come into this electorate that was not spread around the country.
Fantastic, Karen. Well, look, we're running a little over time, so I'd like to thank you very much for your service. Thank you very much for everything you've done for the Gold Coast in your time as federal member for McPherson, and you must be very proud.
Well, I think when my mum said she was proud of me, that made me happy.
All right, Karen Andrews, federal member for McPherson, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.